So plenty of people hate the new Fantastic Four movie, so obviously I had to go see it to judge it for myself. Do I think it's awful? It's bad, but I don't think it's as awful as everyone says. It is definitely not one of the worst films of the year. So the 2015 Fantastic Four is the fourth attempt at a Fantastic Four movie. Now some of you might not know this because, let's face it, most of us grew up on the Fantastic Four films where Chris Evans was the Human Torch, and so we think this is the third Fantastic Four movie. Thing is though, there's one in 1990 which I have never seen, and when I heard about it and looked up some of the video for it, I was quite appalled. In this version of Fantastic Four, all the Fantastic Four members are young adults and we get their origin story. Again, the difference about this film is they're making a interdimensional portal and this machine is going to take them to this other dimension, this more primal dimension, and that's how they get their powers, because something goes wrong in that other dimension. They get their powers and now they're the Fantastic Four. Plus, Dr. Doom is in it, and that's sort of the gist of this movie, really. Now, looking at this film, it is very easy to see why so many people hate it. Do I hate it as much as most people? Definitely not. I might as well start towards the beginning of the film because, really, the best part of the film is the first act or so. First off, I liked how they got their powers in this film. I liked that they used interdimensional travel in this film, because that's one of the things that is fascinating about the Fantastic Four, is because they are explorers. They do travel to other dimensions and other planets sometimes, and having that integrated in the origin story makes absolute sense. I liked the look of the other dimension. It looks a little bland and barren, but ultimately they called it primal, and it makes total sense. It feels like it's another dimension that's still in the progression of forming, and it really looks cool. I liked how the Thing looked. It was all CGI, and sometimes it wasn't as good as the rest of the movie, but it's way better than seeing someone in a rubber suit. I also like a lot of the actors in this film, and for the most part they do a good job. Miles Teller is in it, Michael B. Jordan is in it, Jamie Bell is in it, and plenty of others are just in it that are awesome. The problem with Fantastic Four is it doesn't appeal to its core fan base. People who love Fantastic Four aren't gonna really like this film because it's very different from Fantastic Four that you know and love from the comics. If you're a fan of the 2000s era Fantastic Four with Chris Evans and Jessica Alba and stuff, then you're not gonna like this film because this film's serious while the other one is really corny and cheesy. If you go to superhero films just to have a fun time and a lot of action, you're not going to like Fantastic Four because it's more serious and there isn't a lot of action in the film. This also isn't going to appeal to kids because at its core it is a horror movie, and there are some scenes in it that are just too much for kids. So you're not going to like it if you're a kid. Another thing is there's a lot of talk about the director not being a good person on set and getting drunk. And there's a story about the studio getting way too heavily involved to the point where they're changing it completely. And there's a lot of drama coming out for the Fantastic Four film. And when you put that in your head and you watch the film, you watch it and you can definitely see the editing flaws, and you can see a bunch of the things that felt like it was just simply added in there to make it a little bit more Marvel-like and a little bit more lighthearted. Some really bad one-liners and a lot of bad humor that doesn't work at all for the film. That does really feel like it's simply added in there, And knowing this is the guy that directed Chronicle and just how dark that movie got and just how dark this film gets, it's clear to me that some of that humor, or most of that humor, really wasn't added in there originally and was just added in there by the studio. For a movie that is almost 2 hours long, I believe, it's one of those films that actually feels rushed and there feels like there's something missing in it. There's even plenty of scenes where I'm watching it and it looks like there's clearly more to that scene, but then there's a quick jump cut and you see nothing more of that scene. One of the problems I had with Southpaw is that it added a lot of subplots that really didn't seem to go anywhere or were just simply completed in an unsatisfactory way. The same can be said with Fantastic Four, but instead of it being subplots that are completed unsatisfactorily, it's character development. Now, there's definitely character development in this film, but it's done in a way that doesn't feel satisfactory. Yeah, in the first act you get introduced to all the characters, you get a little bit of themselves, their backstory, you get a little bit of what they're going to be going through throughout the whole film, and then it just sort of gets left hanging towards the whole middle, and then suddenly you get the climax, or not climax, you just get the solution and the character development comes full circle. Here's your character, here's what they're going to be going through throughout the movie, but just the introduction, nothing happening to character development-wise, nothing happening character development-wise, and then suddenly that's resolved and you get character development. It's done really blatantly and there's nothing in between. There's like no beats to the character development. It's just, here it is, and then it's resolved. That's it. It just feels like there's completely something missing in the film. Like there was something that was character development. There was things that should have been there, but it's just left missing. I don't know if it was cut out or it just was never completed in the first place. A lot of people are liking the first act of the film the most, and I can see why, because it does fit a little bit of your stereotypical superhero, even though it is done in a more serious way. And you also get more of an impression that this is what it was supposed to be like, and this was when the director had more say in the film. But even though there are some films where you can see studio involvement, especially with the humor, but I think during the first act it doesn't seem so much of a tonal shift that it's a little bit more acceptable, and that's why people aren't seeing more of the studio involvement in the first act. It isn't until they go into the other dimension, they get their powers, and something else happens that you actually see what this movie truly was going for, and it was like horror. It was science fiction horror, in particular body horror, like The Fly. Yeah, there's some really horrific and crazy moments. It gets really dark really fast, but it makes sense that the first act is still light, because even some horror movies start off light and then they just get really dark. And that's what this film seemed to be going for. I love that horror aspect scene. I love that whole scene. It's the best part of the movie for me, and that's when they've got their powers, they have no idea what to do with them, they're being held captive in this military base, and Reed Richards is crawling through this fence. He's still not fully developed in the stretching, so he's like really stretched out, and there's this one scene where he's just crawling over the grate and all you see is belly and belly and belly, and it's really disturbing. And when the Thing is breaking out of this huge just like rock, because he's like reforming and he's breaking off of other rock, it looks so painful and so horrific. And that's where the movie shines, and it's clear that's where the movie was trying to be like. But then you get the rest of the film, which everyone pretty much agrees is the worst part of the film. Right after you get what this movie should have been like and what the director was going for, you suddenly jump an entire year. So you don't get to see the characters develop their powers. Instead, you get a whole year passes by and you miss out on the action where the military was sending the Thing out on military missions. He had like a confirmed 40-something kills, and now everyone is just good with their powers. And it's like you just skip too much. Now I have some really mixed feelings with Doctor Doom. I don't like his design. He doesn't feel Doctor Doom enough, but the whole concept of his suit melding into his body makes total sense for a film that's supposed to be body horror. It continues this horror aspect where Doctor Doom is literally blowing people's heads off. He's blowing people's freaking heads off. That's fucking awesome. In this version, he's sort of an eco-terrorist. I would say he's an eco-terrorist, because there's one little brief moment where he mentions that the military, the government, and that humans are just destroying the world and stuff. And then when you find that he's been surviving in this primal dimension and he comes back to Earth, he does state that he liked it better there because it was more pure. Humans haven't tampered with it yet, so he's not going to let people tamper with this world and ruin it like Earth. And so he wants to destroy Earth, and that's the whole plot at the end where he's trying to destroy Earth. And so it makes sense. He's an eco-terrorist. He's just not Doctor Doom, so that's why fans will not like it. And of course, the climax of this film is very anticlimactic. There really isn't a lot going for it, and it kind of comes off as just really lame. All the aspects of the final conflict work. It makes sense that all of them would try to attack Doom, but Doom is just too powerful for them and he takes them all out one by one, and then that they have to work together as a team in order to defeat him. And so that whole aspect works. That makes sense for a Fantastic Four movie. The problem is the whole fight scene is just way too quick to the point where it's just not satisfying. The weird part of this movie is the acting is good all around, but then when it gets to the second half of the film, many different actors just feel like they're phoning it in. Miles Teller feels like he's phoning it in. Sue Storm is phoning it in. Sometimes Michael B. Jordan still shines in the second half, but not as much as he did in the first half. It's hard to tell with Jamie Bell because you only get his voice acting in the second half of the film, so I can't tell if he's phoning it in or not. He still was alright throughout the whole movie. And hearing about some of the drama on set, it makes sort of sense why some of the actors were phoning it in towards the second half. Because the second half feels like it was a lot of scenes that were reshot. And if they truly were films that were reshot, and if the director truly was a jerk on set and came to set drunk and a jackass, then it kind of makes sense. Maybe he was totally fine through the whole shooting of the film until the studio decides we need to add some more scenes to it to reshoot some things and change the story up. Then it makes sense that he would be hurt by this and start drinking and just being a douche and just not caring anymore, which in turn makes the actors not care about the film anymore. So I think that's why most of the second half is as dysfunctional as it looks. And I'm really curious what the film would have been like. It does sound like it would have been a science fiction body horror, just with superheroes, and that kind of makes sense for it. It doesn't feel too Fantastic Four-like, which is why people still probably would have hated it, even if it stayed the way it was. But I would have been more interested in that than what we got for Fantastic Four. So in the end, it does have potential. I do sort of like it. There's elements of it that I love, but there's also elements that I hate, and I can understand why a lot of people absolutely can't stand this movie. So I'm going to give Fantastic Four 2.5 stars. Also, just in case you do still happen to go to Fantastic Four, Do not stick around for the whole credits because there is no end credits. So have you seen Fantastic Four? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment. If you haven't seen Fantastic Four, what is the worst superhero film you have ever seen? Mine would probably be Elektra or something like that. It's definitely worse than Fantastic Four. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.